do is close or minimize any other windows or tabs that you have open, silence any notifications on your computer or your phone. Now, I'm not asking you to do this for my benefit. You're already muted. I'm asking you to do this because it's one of the main causes of what's become known as Zoom fatigue. Think about it. A classroom or a conference room is a shared physical space in which distractions are minimized. We enter a different mental space as we enter the physical one. It's the same for your students. At home, students can see everything else they could be doing. They're unlikely to close the tabs with their email and social media sites or other classwork. There aren't the same psychological boundaries or etiquette. Managing those distractions increases cognitive load. That's the brain power that they're using to process your content. So if they're using some of that mental energy to determine what to pay attention to, they have less of it for the material. So that's our first tip of the day. Ask students at the beginning of class to minimize or close windows and turn off phone notifications as they would in the classroom. Ask students to use headphones to mitigate distractions if they can, and to orient their computers so that they can focus on their screen. Keep in mind that students may have a variety of barriers to doing so, and be sympathetic and generous with your expectations. Explain to them the science behind your request. Students are more likely to comply when they understand the benefits to their own learning. And here's a brief look at what we're going to talk about today. We're going to start with a little introduction of who Onlea is. We're going to dive into active learning, both the tools and the science behind it. We're going to talk about collaboration, how to turn the logistical challenges of remote collaboration into advantages. And then we'll touch on building better slide decks. We'll share some best practices that you can use virtually and in face-to-face classrooms. And then that will lead to the final thoughts. And then we'll have an opportunity for you to ask questions, and we'll have a discussion around the topic. Once again, my name is Bo Dezonge. I'm the Client Development Manager here at Onlea. A little background on Onlea. We were founded in 2014 by a group of instructors and researchers from the University of Alberta who thought that there might be a better way to do online learning than the way it was done up to that point. They were specifically focused on MOOCs, which are massive open online courses, which were sort of the first big iteration of online learning at the time. They wanted to look at some design thinking ways to really tackle learner engagement and make online learning much better for students than it had been previously. The first MOOC that the team built was Dino 101, which is rated by Class Central as one of the top 100 MOOCs of all time and has been taken by almost 400,000 people in over 165 countries. We're super proud of that course. Fast forward to today, and now Onlea uses our training, experience, and unique mix of backgrounds to build all types of e-learning courses and assist organizations as they pivot to online learning by choice or necessity. Some of the e-learning experiences we have built include MOOCs, as mentioned before, asynchronous courses, blended courses. We've done some animated explainer videos. We've built apps and lab simulations, and we've dabbled a little bit in VR and AR. At Onlea, we create effective, accessible, and engaging online learning experience for businesses, nonprofits, and educators. We basically believe if you can teach it, you can teach it online, and we have figured out ways to teach really diverse material and do it well. The Onlea team is made up of designers, educators, developers, writers, and producers, all with a shared passion for education technology. On a practical level, our team includes people from the video game industry, software industry, film and television. We have graphic designers, industrial designers, instructional designers, and technical writers. And everyone is involved in the problem solving for your learners, depending on what the subject matter is and the platform that we're using. Joining me today are William Fritzberg, Onlea's lead design strategist, and Jennifer Delia, who is a learning designer. As I mentioned earlier, they'll be on the chat to answer questions that come up throughout the talk. Also lurking in the background or potentially popping in later are Sherry Fricker, a learning designer here at Onlea, Jeff Woodward, our creative director, and our CEO, Adriana Lopez Ferrero. They'll both be around to help answer questions at the end of the webinar as well. So let's jump into the topic. We're going to start by doing an icebreaker activity using a tool called Mentimeter. In one word, what is the biggest challenge of online instruction or online learning? Jeff probably shared a link in the chat for you to jump into and record your answers. If not, you can open menti.com in your browser and enter the following code and just answer the question. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to direct us there to see what the results are. And so we'll just wait to see as everyone switches screens and jumps into a different window. Engaging the learner. Yeah, we see that a lot. Yeah, so we're building a word cloud here. Fun, making it fun, yeah. Connectivity, interesting. Engagement comes up, yeah. Interaction. We'll see if any more answers are coming in. Oh yeah, there we go. Cool. Fatigue, yeah, that's what we're addressing today. Quality, cool. Awesome. So if you haven't seen the word cloud yet, come back to the presentation and I just have it here on the screen. I'll just give a couple more seconds to check it out. Measurable results, keep in enthusiasm, boredom, yeah. Tech support, that can be challenging. You want to remove the barriers of getting to the learning so the learners can actually do the learning. Cool. Excellent. Oh, more coming in. So I'm going to jump back to the webinar. So a lot of great answers there. These are all challenges to be sure. But in doing this activity, we've already addressed some of the challenges and given an example of one of the opportunities. This challenge and opportunity is what's known as social presence. Social presence is the ability of learners to project their personal characteristics into the learning community, thereby presenting themselves as real people. It is a challenge in online learning because students really feel that physical distance, it's tiring to interact through a computer screen, and the natural moments of social interactions like chatting before and after class often need to be actively created. It's an opportunity though, because we can use technology to create a sense of presence in ways that aren't always possible in the classroom. Those are the ideas we want to share with you today. By asking you all a question and getting your responses, I've already asked you to become more present in the little learning community that we've created here. If you took up the request and participated, you've moved from being a passive listener to an active learner. Active learning has been shown again and again to improve learning outcomes, and it's in active learning strategies that teaching an online synchronous class can actually be an advantage. Active learning equals students both doing something to create their own learning and thinking about their learning. The doing might include activities like asking and answering questions, creating a project or assignment, or applying their learning to a case study. The thinking about it might include reflecting on how their learning fits with their existing knowledge, or it might involve revising previous misconceptions to accommodate their new knowledge. One way that moving to online can help facilitate active learning is by creating a different expectation or culture for the synchronous classes. If you have the ability to designate some of the weekly class time for asynchronous, passive learning of content via text or videos, you can devote the synchronous class time to active learning. You can establish an expectation that students will show up to class ready to participate. So, tip number 3 is to make it active. And let's look at some specific ways to do that. The examples of active learning we're going to talk about today are group discussions, polling, and chat. Discussion is extremely valuable for learning, as it can provide students with opportunities to reflect, explore, ask questions, analyze situations or ideas, and confirm understanding. Prompts must align with learning objectives and be open-ended enough to generate meaningful engagement. Questions that seem to have one correct answer can quickly shut down conversation. Discussions often work best when students have had a chance to engage with the content on their own and are coming to the class with some foundational understanding of the concepts to be discussed. So, ask questions that build on that existing knowledge. Students tend to underestimate the value of active learning and may therefore limit their participation. It's helpful to explain the pedagogical function of these activities, including the fact that the feeling that they are working harder is an indication that they are learning more. Plan in advance how you will facilitate discussion and make the process clear to students. Will they have to put up a virtual hand, identify themselves in the chat, or should they just start speaking? Will you unmute them, or will they do that themselves? The logistics may depend on the class size and the resources available to you. In a large class, a TA or an appointed student can help you keep track of who wants to speak next. And don't be afraid of silence. Give students a few moments to digest the questions and begin formulating an answer. And tell students that's what you're doing so that the pause doesn't make them anxious. Throughout the discussion, instructor feedback is key to ensure that students feel heard, that their learning is validated, and that the discussion stays on track. Your active facilitation is also important for making students feel safe to share their ideas and opinions. In addition to formative discussion, as new content is being introduced, plan some less structured wrap-up sessions to answer questions before an exam or major assignment. Such sessions are powerful ways to improve learning outcomes in online education. Now let's talk about polling. Tools like Mentimeter, which we used at the beginning, are great for more complicated polling data and visualization. But most video tools like Zoom have polling built right in, and it's an easy way to add some interactivity. We saw at the beginning how polling tools can be used for icebreakers. They're also a great tool to check understanding of a concept before moving on and to get students to actively build and think about their own learning. You can use polls to ask a multiple choice question to check understanding or practice retrieving information, ask students to rate their comprehension, survey the students' opinions on an issue, or get immediate feedback on a new activity. And we're going to do a poll right now. Let me see. Now, can everyone see that? So for this poll, based on this presentation so far, do you feel better equipped to lead your own Zoom video conferencing classroom? All right, I like the enthusiasm somewhat. Okay, got a little work to do. Perfect. Not at all. Okay, we're here to help. That's. I hope at the end of this presentation that that will move more to the somewhat. I feel pretty good about it. Perfect. So this is just another way to create that active learning space, and I'm happy to see the participation from this. So I'm going to end this now, and we'll continue with the discussion. Let me close that. Now let's talk about the chat. So I'm not sure if everyone's using it right now because it'd be a distraction for me. But the chat feature is a great way to encourage social presence, but as mentioned, can also be distracting and hard to manage. Establish guidelines for using chat. Students are unlikely to follow strict chat restrictions, but it can be helpful to inform them of your ability or inability to follow it. The best way for them to ask important questions and your expectations for etiquette. Ask someone else to monitor the chat window, particularly in large classes. Reading the posts and presenting the material at the same time is extremely difficult. Appointing someone to read the post for you and report on things that require your attention is helpful to ensure that you don't miss key questions or points. If you don't have a teaching assistant to perform this role, appoint a student. And use the chat window to encourage formal participation. Asking questions to which multiple but brief answers are possible and prompting students to respond in the chat can generate participation from students who are normally less vocal. So let's try this now. Answering in the chat window, where is that? What is the course or field that you are teaching? I'm going to bring that up so we can see it. Business, perfect. Employment skills for youth, secondary school photography, cool. You can see that with the lag and everyone typing and then the system scrolling through the answers, that this wouldn't work well for questions that require long answers. But if it's 1 or 2 words and you don't need to be able to respond to each one individually, this can be a great way to build some interactivity. So now we're going to go on to tip number 4. create opportunities to collaborate. Collaboration between students has been well established as an effective way of improving learning. The breakout room functionality of most video platforms offers an easy way to initiate it, but it does require some good planning. So let's look at ways to establish the parameters of the activity and to create collaborative documents to help facilitate it. So breakout room activities should be clear but encourage discussion. Imagine your learning outcome is the following: de-escalate aggressive behavior in the workplace. Which do you think is the best breakout room activity? Ask, what are the seven levels of the de-escalating aggressive behavior scale? Tell them to discuss the role of de-escalation in today's workplace, or describe a scenario and ask the group to discuss the best strategy for de-escalating the situation. And we're going to just do another quick poll here before we dissect the answers. Right on. Okay. Seem to be on the right track. Perfect. All right. So let's go through the different answers. Perfect. So you want to avoid asking questions for which there is a single concrete answer. Asking them to list the 7 levels might help them to memorize those levels, but discussion will end pretty quickly, and they're not engaging in any higher order thinking. Discussing the role of de-escalation is better, but it might be a little vague. The students might come back looking for guidance on what exactly you're looking for. Instead, look for issues or scenarios that will prompt critical thinking and problem solving. Give them a scenario or a case study to work through, and that is a great way to do this. Make sure that the topic or activity aligns with the overarching learning outcomes. Another great topic for breakout rooms is debates or controversies in the field, about which they need to think critically. Breakout rooms can also be used to facilitate ongoing discussions on complex topics, which will allow students to build relationships with regular interactions over the term. In breakout rooms, it can be difficult for students to ask you clarifying questions, and an instructor jumping around between rooms can break the student's flow. Online collaborative tools are a great way to guide their work, document their ideas, and allow the instructor to check in a non-intrusive way. A Google Doc is a quick and easy collaborative tool. Set it up with instructions on what you want to do with the space for them to fill in the answers to the questions you're asking. Include a line for them who will share their findings with the main class after the breakout session is finished. Then simply provide the group with the link in the chat window. Note that if you are using the same document for all the groups, you will need to ask them to make a copy of the document before modifying it. There are a number of other online collaboration tools that will allow students to brainstorm ideas in a more visual format, such as Mural. Using templates or your own framework, you can set up a board on which students can paste virtual sticky notes, post images, or link other media. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to put you in breakout rooms today, but let's try out a really simple mural board. You don't need to create an account. All you have to do is click the link in the chat, and then once you're in the mural board, double click to post a sticky note to respond to our question. What's your favorite takeaway from the webinar so far? And I'm going to switch over to that so we can. And this is Mural. We really enjoy using this tool at Onlea here. And if you want to add a sticky note, you just double click. And I'm going to write hosting. And if the cursors are a little distracting, if you click on yourself at the bottom, you can hide all the cursors. Online tools, active learning, chatting with people. Oh, someone got a circular sticky note going. Perfect. Yeah, I see a lot of the telling the students to close their windows and turn off notifications. It's something we probably think should just be a given, but students probably need to be reminded again and again to remove those distractions. Perfect. I'll give a couple more seconds and then I'll jump back to the presentation. Headphones for kids. Cool. Right on. Well, thanks for participating, everyone. And now I'm just going to go back to the presentation. So now let's go into building a better slide deck. Learners benefit from visuals, so take full advantage of the slide deck. It is being well established that PowerPoint or other presentation tools like Keynote, Google Slides, or Prezi, as well as impromptu visuals like virtual whiteboards or annotation tools, support learning by providing a visual representation of the concepts you're explaining. In an online learning environment where the student's visual field is restricted to faces, this kind of visual support is even more important. But it's also easy to fall into some practices that can be detrimental to learning. Here are some aspects that we're going to touch on today: organization, images, what content to include, managing the focus, and how to coach your students on using it. Students identify improved organization as one of the main benefits to traditional presentation. Use titles to clearly divide your lectures into sections and subheaders to show relationships and hierarchies. Provide an outline or an agenda so they know where you are going and what to watch for. If the images are distracting, learning is impacted. This GIF or GIF might get your attention, but is it getting your attention in the right way? Ensure that any images you include support the content you are presenting. You don't necessarily need a slide for every moment of your lecture. So if you're having trouble finding relevant slide content, don't stretch. Any text on screen should be limited to keywords or short phrases, not full sentences. When learners simultaneously listen and read what's on a screen, they spend extra cognitive energy trying to reconcile any mismatches. Since most students read faster than the instructor speaks, that extra processing is required even if the words are identical. This cognitive overload means that the learner has less capacity to learn the material. If your PowerPoint does have bullet points or small amount of text, keep it short and focused on the key takeaways. Students who focus their attention on the PowerPoint tend to miss information that is only presented orally, but this effect is mitigated when the slides are concise. Asking questions throughout the lecture is a really powerful way to both check understanding and reinforce learning. Put any questions that you plan to address to students right on the screen. This helps to activate and guide their learning. Many students just copy the bullets from a PowerPoint presentation, not recognizing that there is additional content being provided orally that they need to pay attention to and take notes on. Don't assume that they have already learned the skills of listening and note-taking. Coach them on what the presentation is for and how to best engage with the material. And now we're going to touch on the camera. While your image is important to the students, their images can actually be a problem. So let them turn off their cameras. In a classroom environment, your gaze moves around the room. It is not typically focused on any one student unless they are speaking. Similarly, students are able to break eye contact by looking at their notes or at your presentation or whiteboard. In an online class, the close face-to-face interaction and long periods of direct eye contact, as well as the student's ability to see and judge their own appearance, are exhausting. Our brains are accustomed to interpreting the body language of the people around us all the time. Online students don't have access to those cues, but our brains continue to search for them, and we feel uncomfortable or anxious in their absence. This anxiety is exacerbated if we have all our classmates' faces in gallery view and are trying to process them all at once. Then there's the anxiety that students may feel over others seeing their home environment, which is often an issue of equity. Tell students that whether to use the camera is their choice, and tell them why. Often students who do use their camera are frustrated when others don't. So it's helpful to normalize it while ensuring them that you still expect their full attention and participation. So we've talked a lot about ways to foster social presence by including your students in active learning. Social presence is also about you as the instructor being present as a real person. When students feel like they're being taught by a human and not a computer, their learning is significantly improved. We recently saw on Twitter that a student was enrolled in a class being taught by a professor who had died in 2019. The student was watching video lectures that were recorded before the prof died. This is the opposite of social presence. So our final tip is to be you and be present. Tell that anecdote that illustrates the concept you're discussing. Crack a joke if that is comfortable for you. Open the Zoom session a few minutes before class and chat with the students as they log in. And don't be afraid to acknowledge this strange situation that we're all in. Check in with your students and make sure they're okay. Tell them that you scored some Lysol wipes at Costco. Whatever it is that will help you make that connection. And then just to touch on a couple of courses that we've created over the years, if you'd like to see more and see more of what we've done, please go to our website at onlea.org. And that concludes the webinar. My name is Bo Dizoni. I'm the Client Development Manager at Onlea. Thank you for your time today. I really appreciate you being here. And now let's open the floor to questions. If you'd like, you can unmute yourself or ask a question in the chat. We have a great team here to respond to your queries. Okay, no questions coming in yet. All right.
I have a question I can ask. I've worked with students online in a situation with kind of extreme inequity and access to technology. I had a set of twins in my class who had 11 siblings and really just simply didn't have a home environment that even lent itself to being online in class. And and students whose internet didn't allow them to really even connect to the class. So how do you deal with those kinds of technological inequities in this sorts of situations?
Sure. Let me pass this off to either Jennifer or William, who would like to touch on that.
Let's see if my mic is working.
It is.
Working? Okay. I was also doing the music duty earlier. That's a tough question. So what I'm understanding is so not every student had the same access to the internet or yeah. Could you kind of rephrase that question for me?
Okay, yes, I'm dealing with those students who have, there's a wide range of ability to access the internet. Some of them, of course, are having to share with large numbers of family members. And also the background noise is just, defeating for them. Others just have really poor bandwidth and have difficulty even checking in. What I've tried to do is, of course, always record and have it available asynchronously if they can't be present. But I've literally had students who participated in everything that except for the actual class, handed in everything on time. I never saw their faces through an entire semester.
Wow.
Or spoke to them individually other than the first day of class.
Yeah. I don't have a specific answer for that. I think that's something that is challenging, especially with the digital divide and sort of our transition to relying on technology during the pandemic. But finding some ways to maybe use some other some other interactive tools. If they can't kind of have their microphones on, because there's sort of competing stuff happening in the background. I would suggest maybe looking at what are those other modes of connectivity that could be explored, and it's definitely a great thing to record the lectures and to make those available asynchronously. Um, and maybe Jeff, do you have an idea?
Well, I was just going to jump in. It's not a classroom environment, but one of the things that's actually been really effective us for maintaining sort of constant connectivity is actually a chat feature like Slack or tool or Discord, tools like that. That is open to the students at all time. If it's a smaller class, you can do that and just sort of check in and moderate it. But they can have direct chat. They can have specific topics that you can set up for them, and it's much more technologically accessible. You don't have to worry about environmental issues as much. You can share files on there, and so it's sometimes taking a step backwards technology-wise to something simpler can actually be a really good way of leveling the playing field without handicapping everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just add to that we're living in a time where, I mean, there's certain things that just become priorities over others, and I'm really a strong believer in that the well-being and the mental health of the students really has to come first. And unfortunately, the challenges that you're describing put a lot more pressure on you as the instructor and your own time. And your ability to sort of make those personal connections outside of that designated class time. But as much as you're able to do that to sort of make up for that lack of social presence, that lack of social interaction, any way that you can do that with those one-on-one touch points, even if they are asynchronous, I think those are really important to try and make up for in some way. And I think just we need to be really flexible. We need to be really understanding and ease some of that anxiety that the students are probably feeling about their inability to connect, and just be really real, be really honest and open, and say, it's okay, we'll sort it out. And recognize that it's become such a cliche of the last year, but that we're all in this together kind of sentiment. I think we really need to just reiterate as much as we can that there are going to be some inequities that we just can't solve in our current situation in a perfect way.
Awesome. Thanks, team.
Thank you.
I think we have a couple of questions in the chat here. So Jonah had, I'm coming to the idea of letting students turn off their camera. Do you feel you use one way of gauging engagement by doing so? And if so, how do you get around it? So I think it's, do you feel you lose one way of gauging engagement, and how do you get around it? Jennifer William, any response to that question?
Yeah, I think it comes back to a lot of the suggestions that we were making today around other ways of incorporating that active learning, whether it's with the chat or with polls or other things like that. Really establishing those clear expectations, letting them know that you do expect them to be present and participating, and that you don't need to be watching them necessarily to determine that. I mean, let's face it, in a classroom situation, just because they were there and you could see them didn't necessarily mean that they were present, right? There were always students kind of with their phones underneath the desks, right? So being able to see them, even though it feels like it should be a way of monitoring their participation, it actually really isn't. So I think as long as you give those other engagement opportunities, participation opportunities, and really establish those clear expectations, I think that goes a long way. And I think a lot of the resistance to letting students turn off their cameras is really just, it doesn't feel intuitive. It feels like that's going to mean that they disengage, but I think that's partially shifting our own mindset.
Yeah. On another side of that, something we did the other day as sort of a team icebreaker was to start the meeting by turning off all our cameras and doing audio Pictionary. And this was so interesting because it took the pressure off, having to perform and be seen visibly. And people were able to kind of be themselves in an authentic way and sort of, make sounds, and other people kind of guess what that is. And it completely changed the, the sort of the feeling in the room is we were able to be creative without being seen. So I think there's some kind of effective ways that we're just learning about now and experimenting and exploring with that can be really effective, and it is thinking outside of the box and maybe even turning off the box.
Perfect. Thanks, team. Another question on the chat. Do we have any drawbacks to Discord versus Slack from Pamela? William, I'm going to leave that with you.
I don't, yeah, I can't. I think like one is definitely kind of like Discord is sort of growing as sort of a platform for, communities and groups, and it's sort of becoming sort of an authentic place for people to organize themselves. Slack is a largely corporate tool for workplaces. They do the same thing. They have many of the same features. I think it just depends on how you want to use the tool, or kind of how you want to kind of maintain it. Yeah, that's about as much as I could say about those. Yeah, I'm not sure that there's a difference that's worth putting one or the other. Just depends on your use case, I suppose.
Perfect. Got a great question here from Karen. What suggestions do you have for figuring out what tech for interaction is best for the skill level of your class? I frequently work with people who can barely use Zoom. I'm worried about trying Miro, Menti, etc. with them. Jennifer, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, and well, I mean, I think you're already a long way there by recognizing that that's potentially a barrier. So yeah, I think it's a great point that you need to keep your own learners in mind when you're considering which of these tools to implement. And if you think that technology is going to be probably it's not going to be too challenging, but it might be intimidating, and that you might lose them just in that intimidation factor. So I think being really honest and open and asking them for feedback, asking them to give you information about what they are comfortable with and what they're not, making sure that you really take the time to go through instructions, show them exactly how to do it, provide those instructions on the screen in a way so that it's really easy for them to find their way to it. Take note if somebody's kind of dropped off, if somebody hasn't signed in to the mural or whatever, check in, see if you can talk them through it. Maybe make use more of the built-in tools. So things like we compared the Menti pull versus the built-in to Zoom pull, something that's right there on their screen is obviously going to be a lot easier for them to integrate. But yeah, I think the fact that you're recognizing that that's a barrier is already a great step. And thanks for bringing that up, because for sure there's vast differences in people's computer literacy and not just literacy, but that comfort. So you don't want to introduce more cognitive overload by having them worry about being able to use those tools.
I would also allow time for play. Not sort of create some sort of opportunities. Explain this is a new tool that you're exploring for use, and sort of provide sort of that space and time for the learners to also kind of get familiar with it. And other things you might want to consider, and something that we're seeing with Mural is it's great for like the whiteboard, sort of replicating that aspect of a physical classroom, but it's not the most responsive in the sense that you see the information from really far up, but then you have to zoom in to see the detail. So I think that's another consideration that's worth thinking about with any tool that you choose is how does it work on different devices? How does it work on a phone? How does it work on a tablet? How does it work on a laptop or a desktop? How is the interactivity supported on each of these devices? And is it easy to use in each of those? So that might kind of require a little bit of research on the part of the instructor, but I think thinking about those use cases is part of preparing and planning for something that will work effectively.
Perfect. I see that Sky had a question, but I think Jeff responded to it about our other webinar about asynchronous engagement. So if there's any follow-up, Sky, just type it into the box there and we'll get to it. But I do see that Russ has a question. So Russ, if you'd like to ask away, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna provide an answer. I'm an instructional designer out at University of Washington. And one of the things for asynchronous to get...
I'm going to interrupt us for a second and say, Russ is also the instructional designer on a bunch of the award-winning MOOCs that we've made. So he knows whereof he speaks, and everyone should listen to him. Carry on, Russ.
I was just going to say, with respect to getting the forms and getting people engaged asynchronously, ask purposeful questions. Don't ask what's your favorite food, how far...
Oh, you muted yourself, Russ.
I think the cat muted me. And so I said, don't ask useful questions that engage people, and be prepared to share your own answers as a model for how you want your students to respond. One of the great questions I heard last summer was a political science professor that said, what's your go-to song that gets you through, that picks you up and helps you get, your project across the finish line, when you need a real boost. And then what he did was he created a class playlist in YouTube of all the songs that all the students had suggested, and it was kind of a neat way to kind of engage. And of course, he shared his song and why it was special to him. Yeah, I won't monopolize, but I will jump in from time to time.
Perfect. Thanks, Russ. Appreciate it. So Amy has a question, which I think is great for Jennifer here. Can you share more of the thinking behind why instructors should not pop in and out during breakout rooms? We indicated that it could be intrusive, so let's elaborate on that.
Yeah, and that's certainly not prescriptive. You know your learners, or you can get to know your learners, and there's probably situations, there's probably group dynamics where you popping in as the instructor would be really helpful. I think it really depends, and as instructors that every class is different. Sometimes you have a class that's really outgoing, they're really engaged, they all want to talk at the same time, and then you might be teaching the exact same material the next semester, and they're completely silent. So I think that there's a little bit of just sort of feeling that out involved. But what I've certainly found is that sometimes when I, as that Jeff has sort of started to address it in the chat window, as that authority figure, or even just coming in the middle of a conversation, it just kind of distracts them, interrupts their flow of thought, and the conversation can sort of shut down. So if I'm joining a breakout room right at the beginning, then it can sometimes be helpful. But then the next group that I jump to, where they're already halfway through, then it kind of interrupts that flow that they have going. So it's something that you can kind of feel out for yourself. We're not saying that it's something you should never do. But if you don't want to do it because of some of those challenges, or if you're finding that it's problematic when you do, that's where making sure that they have really clear guidelines from you can help to keep them moving forward.
Perfect. Russ, you want to add?
Yeah. So I think this might also be an issue between adult learners and younger learners. I just finished a weekend blitz with 120 4-H students, teenagers, And I did find that when the adults go into the breakout rooms, the teenagers clam up. And that was one of the feedback that we got from the students, was they felt intimidated by some of the, you know, when the adult resource people were see, that's my cat again. When the adult resource people were engaged. One of the strategies that I used at this conference was using the self-select breakout rooms and just telling them which, so we organized them into colors. And we told them right at the beginning that your color is, you know, whatever. We had a rotating slide at the beginning. But once they knew what color they were in, I set up self-selecting breakout rooms by color. And then what they could do is they could go in when they wanted. And if they had a question about something, I instructed them that they can pop out back to the main room and I'll be here. And so they can kind of come out of their room, ask a question, go back in and come out. And they were kind of in control of when they were going in and out of rooms. So that's one of the benefits of self-selecting breakout rooms.
Those are great tips. Thanks, Russ. And I guess I would also just add that think back to the purpose of the breakout room, of the collaboration, that learning is really aided by that collaborative process, by giving students the opportunity to talk through a problem or an issue, to really reflect and come up with their own solutions. And they often feel, and I think this is true of both adults and younger students, that when that instructor comes in, the instructor is now going to tell them how to solve the problem, that they're going to give them the answer, or that the instructor is judging that process of talking it through. So if we really want to foster that collaboration as a learning tool, us getting out of the way as instructors is probably going to help facilitate that a bit better.
Perfect. Any other questions from the crowd? No, and I think we addressed everything on the chat. So if we missed anything, please reach out to myself, or you can find our info email address on our website. And we'll be sending out a thank you email with a follow-up survey as well, and a link to this webinar so you can review it at another time. But really just want to say thanks to everyone for coming today. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come and talk with us about beating Zoom fatigue. So I hope everyone has a good day and a great week.